Welcome to my bewitching podcast, where I take you on a journey to initiate you into the mysteries and pleasures of all things magical and more. I'm Julie Nelson, Rich Witch, botanical perfumer, astrologer, and creator of the Fragrant Oracle. I'll discuss a myriad of topics passionately on women rising unapologetically, witchcraft, including spells, rituals, insightful astrology updates, and oracle card readings. I'll also introduce you to special guests who share their bountiful knowledge and experience in the art of witchcraft, the intuitive and healing arts, and being wildly unapologetic. Hello and welcome back to Rich Witch Julie podcast. And today I'm feeling really excited because I have met this beautiful woman and she is going to tell her story of living with or as a Native American Indian. So please allow me to introduce you to Black Crow Walking, known as Crow. And I myself am very much looking forward to this, and who knows where it may lead. So over to you, Crow, to introduce yourself and share whatever you feel like, because I believe that we will all be inspired and learn something from this.
Hello, everybody. My friends call me Crow. I lived with the Lakota Ghost Horse Indians in North Carolina in the Smoky Mountains, and we lived primitively. We wore skins and tanned our own hides and ate out of the forest every day. My husband was a blacksmith and I was a wood carver at the time, so we made our money by doing that. And the thing that impressed me the most about living in the Smoky Mountains, which was probably half an hour from the Tennessee border and the beginning of the Appalachian Way, was the seasons. For me, I will never ever get over the amazing seasons that were in the mountains. So I arrived in winter and there was 6 foot of snow on the ground.
Wow.
And all the trees, none of the trees had leaves on them, and I was quite shocked. And I said, "Are you experiencing dieback here?" And my husband laughed and said, "No, every tree in the forest is deciduous." So my experience of winter time was that, there was icicles hanging off the eaves, and we had to stockpile wood all year to be able to have the fire going 24/7. All the plants had to be brought inside that I was growing food in, and the animals were all inside. The pristine silence in the forest when there's 6 foot of snow is incredible. The only thing you can hear, because there's no leaves on the trees, there's nothing, no sound whatsoever. It's just your own breath and your own footsteps that you can feel. And when you step into the snow, it's blue underneath, a sky blue. And
Wow.
and you'll find that in Australia as well, in Jindabyne, when it's really deep snow, that it's when you step into the soft snow, it's always blue underneath. Yeah, so then you know that spring is coming when the daffodils push their heads up along the driveway in 2 foot of snow. And then the next day there's kind of rivulets running around everywhere of water melting, and the little green shoots come back on the tree. And then the next day you come out and the whole forest is back and all the leaves are out. And when the leaves weren't out in wintertime, you could actually see the woodpecker, whereas in summer or the rest of the year you can't see him because there's so many leaves. But you could see him actually doing his pecking. And we had squirrels that I used to feed. They had babies, so I had four squirrels, and I had a blue jay that I fed during winter that didn't hibernate, and I had hummingbirds that used to come down and feed. So once spring arrived, that everything in the forest was edible. We just ate out of the forest. It was just absolutely incredible. Every weed on the ground was edible, and then when summer came, the whole of the forest filled up with fireflies. And so you'd go outside at night and they'd land in your hair and on your clothing, and the whole forest was just like a fairy tale, twinkles everywhere.
Wow.
And summer brought a whole different set of greens in the forest, but it also was berry season. So you could go into the forest and pick wild strawberries and blueberries and blackberries, but you had to be really careful that you didn't, when you were in the blueberry patch, because that's where the bears were mostly, the black bears. We had black bears on our property and we had rattlesnakes. So consequently, I never ever went outside my house without throwing knives in my boots and a bear knife on my side. And a herb cutting knife around my neck. So, yeah, summer was just a magical place, and we had wild raspberries and all sorts of berries in the forest. So I'd take my salad bowl out to pick our lunch, which consisted of weeds only, but they were delicious, and berries. And that's how we lived. And then autumn would start to come and all the trees in the forest went bright red leaves. And then the next day they would be orange. And then the next day they would be bright yellow. And then the next day they would be lime green. And the next day they'd just fall completely on the ground. So you'd have 7 foot of leaves and you could lay down in the forest and nobody would know you were there because there was so many leaves. And then my favourite part was when they all dried out and got crunchy, and I would walk through the forest crunching the leaves like a little kid. And we had lots of springs on our property. So there were springs coming out of the ground everywhere, and forming little pools. So I had a pool that was down where a tree had been struck by lightning and lived. And in the Native American Indian culture, you can take the bark from that tree and create rain by burying it in a piece of black cotton where you wanted the rain. And when I came back to Australia, I was a guest speaker out near a place called Burrell. And they'd been in drought on that farm for months and months and months. So I gave him a little pouch and he buried it. And about 2 months later, he rang me up and said, "Can you stop the rain, please?"
I love it.
So it's hilarious. Yeah, so my life consisted of daily of wood carving, collecting food, making craft. I made drums, and we had a valley full of stinging nettle, and stinging nettle is fantastic for making string. So we soaked it and then beat it, and then we got the fibre out of that. And I had to get enough fibre to go around my house 3 times, around the outside of the house, in order to make the drum. So, yeah, that was fun.
That's fascinating. So is it the same type of nettle that we get here in Australia?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Wow.
Mm.
I mean, as you're sharing this, I can actually visualize it. I lived off grid for 8.5 years, and we had a beautiful property surrounded by forest. And we used to go wild blackberry picking, but we also grew all of our own vegetables. And often, I'd just sit in the garden and eat the fresh greens like peas and broad beans and asparagus, and it was just so many beans and snow peas, and it was just so nice to be able to do that, like just sitting there, and I might be weeding and munching on some fresh greens. It was so lovely, but I have to go back and ask you about the black bears. And they loved blueberry bushes. Is that because they were so dense that they could hide in them and keep warm, or what? What?
Why do they ate the blueberries?
Well, absolutely. I could imagine that. So they weren't actually sleeping in there. It was because they would be feeding there.
Yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Gotcha. Did you have any encounters?
Oh, yes, I saw the bears all the time. We actually had uh, bear hunting season 6 weeks of the year and deer hunting season a different 6 weeks of the year. And we were on a locked community, which meant we had a locked gate. But the hunters would come on our property despite the locked gate and bring their hunting dogs. So they might have 32 hunting dogs. None of them had names because they just kept them on chains and they were only for one purpose, and that was hunting, which was really awful. And
Mm-hmm.
um, anyway, I fronted them and, told them to get off the land. And they said, our pappy's been a hunting in these here forests for 100 years. You think you're going to stop us from hunting you? We're going to shoot your ass.
Whoa, how disrespectful.
Oh yeah, but
Shame on
unfortunately,
them.
when we rang the police were hunters as well, so they didn't do anything about it.
God, it's
Yeah.
sickening, isn't
So
it?
we watched the bears have cubs and run around our property with the cubs, but they never bothered me. But I did carry a knife just in case.
Yeah,
Mm.
yeah.
But they were more scared of human beings because of the hunting season.
Of course, they'd stay away, but also I would imagine, I mean, animals are very intelligent that if they knew they were safe around you, they weren't really going to bother you. Because any animal will really only attack if it has to. What are your thoughts on that with bears?
Um,
Or hungry?
Yeah, hungry, but bears are carnivorous, and I mean they eat berries and they don't eat meat, so
Mm,
I'm not
mm.
something that they would want to eat.
Yeah, yeah, which is good. Oh, that disturbs me. We know things and we hear things, but just what the white people do, it's just so shameful.
Yeah,
Ever gonna, get better? That's a big question. I work hard to share messages and put things out, but there's still so many ignorant people, aren't there?
yeah. Well,
Mm.
we had 65 families in our tribe, and
Mm-hmm.
we met every Wednesday night to maintain the traditional language through song. It was the Lakota Ghost Horse tribe, and
Mm-hmm.
Buck Ghost Horse was the chief of our tribe. And his son Paul was the one that ran most of our ceremonies. So Buck was actually part of the General Custer War. So he had
Wow.
lots of stories about Custer, and he was quite rude, but only from a point of view of white people, because
Mm.
like I'd go to walk through the door and he'd slam the door in my face, and I'd get really upset, and I just realized that that was his sense of humor. And
Mm-hmm.
and he told a story once about, so in the Native American Indian tribe, if you have a dog, and the dog wanders into a ceremonial site while there's ceremony on, that dog is killed and eaten because
Whoa.
you're not
Mhm.
allowed to have dogs in the ceremonial. It's, sacred space. So anyway, Uncle Buck and a friend of his went to stay with this woman, and she went to work, and she had a little, and there was a grandmother with them as well, and she had a little, one of those little white fluffy dogs, and
Mm.
anyway, the grandmother was knitting, and the dog wouldn't leave her wool alone, so she picked it up and broke its neck.
Oh my
And
God.
and then the guys, Uncle Buck and his friend, didn't know what to do. So, because she was coming home at 5 o'clock, so they took it outside and cooked it.
Oh shit. I'm not
And then
quite sure I can deal with
they
that
all
though.
ate it for dinner. They ate it for dinner, and the lady didn't know what she didn't know that they'd killed her dog, and she really enjoyed the dinner and wanted seconds, and she kept saying, "I wonder where my dog is."
Oh my God.
This is a sort of sense of humor that Native American Indians have, It's
Yeah.
like
Yeah.
blew me away. But anyway, I had the most incredible experience living with the Native Americans, and every weekend we did ceremony. So some of those ceremonies you had to prepare for a whole year to be able to do the ceremony. So you would
Wow.
prepare through the seasons, and you would gather things like pemmican, which is dried buffalo meat, and berries from the forest, corn from the corn sisters, water from the spring, and they would be offerings to the spirits. And um, so whenever we did a ceremony, there was always an offering plate put out for the spirits.
Mm-hmm.
And then um, the most incredible ceremony that I ever did, which you won't ever read about in a book, is called a Lawampi ceremony. And it's been handed down from generation to generation to generation. When I was in America, I had breast cancer,
Mm-hmm.
and my husband went to the chief and offered 7 pieces of his skin for them to run a Lawampi ceremony for me. And I was at the time in a detox center, detoxing every organ in my body. Um, and he gave the skin, which they put into a medicine pouch, and um, and then they rang me there was 3 of us having the Lawampi, but I wasn't there. I was in the detox center, but they asked me to blacken my room and um, just sit in meditation for 6 hours, which I did, and I felt hands all over my body. Um, but I'm going to tell you about the Lawampi ceremony that happened 12 months later, because 12
Mm-hmm.
months later I had to give thanks for my life.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to weave, like plaiting, I'm going to weave the stories together so that you can get a good idea of how a Lawampi ceremony is run. So on the second Thanksgiving Lawampi, I had to offer tobacco 12 months beforehand. And the chief, usually when the chief accepts the tobacco, he will do the ceremony. Not the case with Lawampis. And so the tribe arrived at the chief's house, and they blackened the doors and the windows so that you could not see a skerrick of light in the room, not even your hand in front of your face. So the men sat to the right side of the altar. Now the altar was quite big um, in the lounge room. Can't really give you diameters, but it was fenced in with the prayer ties that I had made. So during that 12 months of thanks, I had given thanks in many ways for my life, and each prayer tie had to have a prayer in it, which I made with tobacco and cotton, and I had to make 450 prayer ties during that year, and that was what fenced in the altar. And I had to collect mole dirt. We had moles on our property, and when the mole runs under the ground, it travels under the ground. It leaves a little mound on top of the ground so you can see where it's run. And if you collect that mole dirt, it's sacred to the Native American Indians, and they make their altars out of it. So in the lounge room on black plastic was an altar made with mole dirt that I'd collected, and the family altar. So things are put on the family altar, like your favourite necklace or things like that, feathers, Anyway, on the altar was 8 rattles, Native American Indian rattles, which were handed down from the 17th century, and wings of birds. So, and then there was a chair at the front of the altar for me to sit on, and there was a chair for Uncle Ted and another guy. Uncle Ted was he wasn't Lakota, but he was part of our tribe, and he spent a lot of time with us, and he lived in our area, so we considered him to be, one of our wonderful elders. And Uncle Ted had stomach cancer, at the same time that I had breast cancer, and he went into hospital, and I went into the detox center. We did it differently, and he had so in the first ceremony, when neither of us were there, what they did was they put up a photograph on the chair with our ceremonial robes. So my ceremonial robes were there, and then my photo in behind glass in a frame, and so was Uncle Ted's. Now, in that first ceremony that I wasn't there, the grandmothers told me, now Uncle Ted believed in the little people. So he believed they lived under the mountain, and so every time he walked through the forest, because he lived in the forest, he would leave shiny pennies and marbles for the little people. So when we weren't there, the grandmothers told us that they saw 2 little people walk in between our chairs onto the altar, and they looked at everybody, and the bigger one left and the small one sat on Uncle Ted's chair. And when they turned the lights on 6 hours later, Uncle Ted's photograph had been taken out from behind the glass and put in behind the glass on my photograph. And they believed that Uncle Ted gave me his healing. So Uncle Ted was in hospital. He sat up the next day after his operation, renamed all the nurses Native American Indian names, because that's what he did. And then the next day he died. So they believe that he gave me his healing. And in the one where I was there, I had to go to the chief of the tribe and offer him a peace pipe in order for him to do the ceremony for me. So you can't just buy a peace pipe. Someone has to give you a peace pipe. So the grandmothers gave me a peace pipe, and I walked up to him and offered the peace pipe. And he put out his hands to take it and then turned them down, which meant he wasn't going to do the ceremony for me. Now, I'd prepared for 12 months for that ceremony, and he had accepted my tobacco, so I was in total absolute shock. Didn't know what was going on. Poor little white girl. And anyway, the grandmothers just put their arms around me and they said, "Don't worry, it'll be all right." And so I waited about 15 minutes, and then they said, "You go again." So I went again and I offered him the peace pipe and he turned his hands down. And this happened 3 times. And then on the fourth time, he accepted it. And I said afterwards to him, "Why did you do that to me?" And he
Mm.
said, "I wanted you to know what the cost is for me to run this ceremony." He said, "This ceremony has been handed down since the beginning of time and the beginning of our people." And he said, "I don't do this lightly, and I have to call the spirits." So now I'm going to tell you what calling the spirits means.
Mhm.
When I went into the room, the the women sat to the left side of the room with their legs tucked in and the children in front of them. And the men sat to the right-hand side of the room with the drums, and they were cross-legged. And they had to learn 450 songs to do this ceremony. So the
Whoa.
singer's role in this ceremony was amazing. And of course, we did sweat lodge before I went into the ceremony to purify myself,
Mhm.
um, and smudging me. And so I sat down on the chair at the altar and looked at the wings and looked at the rattles on the floor, and then they turned the lights out and I couldn't see a thing, and the singer began to sing his songs, and within 2 minutes of the singer singing the songs and the chief was sitting in behind the altar, um, the whole room filled up with what I'd call orb lights. There was thousands of them, and they were literally flying at me, and I kept ducking and weaving because I felt like I was going to be hit in the head with this. And it was the ancestors who protect the ceremonies. And so the whole room, instead of being pitch black, I could now see everybody because the orb lights were constantly flying around. And then the wings lifted up off the ground, off the floor, and started flapping around over my head, and and hitting me on the head, and and then the rattles were lifted up off the floor by nobody, and they were rattling over my head, and my mouth dropped open. I have never ever in my entire life seen a demonstration of spirit like that strongly, and I literally could not speak. And so yeah, that sort of went on for um well, it was a 6 hour ceremony. And what I'd had to do during that 12 months of preparation was I had to um make a gift for everybody in the tribe. And it's not like you can go to an op shop and buy things. You have to actually make a gift. So because I was a wood carver, I made a lot of spoons, and my spoons used to go out the door like hotcakes because they were made from beautiful red cedar, and they had naked women carved into the handles. So anyway, I made some of those, and I learnt Cherokee beading from the Cherokee grandmothers that came to the primitive living skills. And so I made tobacco pouches for a lot of the people, and I had special gift for the chief. I had a special gift for the singer, and I had a special gift for which I gave to the singer and the chief and the firekeeper, because the firekeeper had to, he had to keep fire in torrential rain. He had 4 years of training to be a firekeeper for a sweat lodge. You can't
Mm.
just go and have a sweat lodge. You have to do the training to be able to call the spirits and keep the fire going. Anyway, and then at the end of the ceremony, I had to put out a blanket on the floor and put all the gifts that I had made for the people in the tribe on the blanket. It's called a blanket ceremony. And so, um, the grandmothers would just dive on the gifts as if they were being greedy, but they weren't. They'd look at the gift and they'd say, "Oh, this would be great for you, Tani Pabe." And Tani Pabe was one of the firekeepers, and he he was in the special services in the Vietnam War, and he was shot up and picked up by a helicopter, and the helicopter was shot down. So he actually fell out of the helicopter into the forest floor in Vietnam, and he survived for a month with a shot up leg, um, crawling around the forest and just eating the weeds like I was doing in the forest. So yeah, he survived that before he was picked up and taken again. Um, yeah, so it's a lot of fun, and mind blowing at the same time.
Yeah, I can imagine. I actually can imagine. So, for one, how many people would survive for a month with their legs shot up and crawling around on the ground? So that wisdom and knowledge and belief, I mean, how powerful is that? It's making me go goosebumpy. And just watching you tell the story is just like, with your face and your eyes and that I can feel certain things come through. And when you were talking about the orbs, I've actually experienced orbs in ceremony,
Hmm.
and I haven't for a long time. And it was ooh, between 2 and 3 decades ago, actually, and it was such a powerful experience. And nobody else could see them, only me, which was really interesting. And the feeling that I had that came over me was undeniably so beautiful that I had tears streaming down my eyes. I felt so much love. It was very, very powerful. And the
Mm.
first one was like this big pink orb, and it floated in the middle of the circle and it hung there for a little bit and then it shot off. And then there were other times when I would see small blue and green ones. And I always thought of them as being the fae or fairies. That was what came to me. So when you talk about the little people under the mountain, are they referring to what we, would call fae or fairies, or is it a different kind of being? Just curious about that.
I think they're more like leprechauns. Um,
Oh,
yeah, but that's just my impression.
mhm,
The the Yeah, and like I never actually got to talk to Uncle Ted about them. Just at the funeral, we covered a whole blanket full of marbles and we tossed them into, as a group, we just lifted the blanket and threw them all into the forest to honor him. But
mm,
yeah, he knew the little people, and I only know what the grandmothers told me about the first ceremony. So yeah.
mhm, mhm. It's fascinating in their absolute power and their belief. Um, I wish, I wish that there was more of that in our society here in Australia because it is real.
Oh, absolutely.
It is so real.
I
Yeah.
met a guy called David who used to be the manager of Celtic Salt in America, and
Mm-hmm.
he was born with the ability to see onto the fourth dimension, which I can also see onto.
Mm-hmm.
And he, as a child, was absolutely terrified because he could see all the brownies and the fairies and the gnomes and the elves and the trolls and all those sorts of creatures that are, we think are mythical, but it's actually that people that can see onto the fourth dimension can see these beings.
Yeah.
And they live on this earth just as we do, but we can't see them because we're stuck in the third dimensional vibrational frequency. So,
Absolutely. I have no doubt, no doubt, because I've experienced on occasions that. Um,
so I met this David uh, from the Celtic Salt at a dinner party, and he was telling me about how terrified he was as a child. He used to spend all his time either under the bed or in the wardrobe, hiding from these creatures, and he didn't know how to deal with it. So he ended up, when he was 18, managing to turn it off, and then when he was about 45, he was sitting in his lounge room, and two brownies walked into two gnomes walked into his lounge room and started tipping their hat to him, and speaking old English, And he said, "What are you doing here?" And he said, "We live here. We have a whole city in your backyard." So he said, "Come." They said, "Come with us," and they showed him, and they told him what they were doing on the earth to help the earth and all that sort of stuff. And so he actually wrote a book about it, which I bought. It was really badly written, but anyway, we won't go there. And so I said to him, "Hey, I've got this really special tree on my land, which was struck by lightning and lived, and underneath it comes a spring." And I said, "I always go down there when I'm upset, or I've been growing shiitake mushrooms down there, and shiitake mushrooms are a whole adventure. You have to cut down a tree. You have to ask permission of the tree first. Then you cut it down and you cut it up into pieces, and the tree will only let you take it if you use absolutely every part of the tree. And then you drill a 2-inch hole in the tree and inject mycelium into the tree, and then you soak the log overnight and pull the log out, and about every week you go and soak all the logs." So we had this little pond down there, and it was a magic place for me, and I always felt very special energy there. And so I said, "David, will you come to my place and see if there's any fourth dimensional beings down at my pond?" And I said, "And I'll make you lunch on Sunday." And so he came out on Sunday with his wife, and we had lunch, and then I took him down to the pond, and he started tipping his hat and speaking old English. And he said, "You've got a whole colony of brownies here." And I said, "Have I?" And he said, "Yeah." And he said, "And the woman is coming forward, and she said her name is Evelyn, but you may call her Eve. And she's referring to you as the dancer between the worlds." And I just about fell over, because I'd never told anybody this, but I had a CB radio where I was called the dancer. And at the time I was studying shamanism and teaching shamanism, and I was learning to fly between the worlds, which is a place between awake and asleep. Now, you've probably been there. Because there's people there, you're not really asleep, but you can see these people, they're talking, whatever.
Yep.
So I was learning to fly between that. And so when she said the dancer who flies between the worlds, I just about fainted that it was real, like I couldn't see them, but it was real. And so David said, "She wants to know what you want." And I said, "Well, I want to be able to see them." And apparently they all fell around laughing because I could see them. Well, I can see things with my eyes shut, not with my eyes open. That's the thing. And anyway, the next morning I woke up and it was snowing, and I hadn't actually opened my eyes yet. And I could see a dragon's head in the frame of my window, and growing up through the wall was a tree that went through the frame. And I thought, "Oh, I'm going to get up and draw that because I'm an artist." So I went to draw it, and this whole being, which was like a very pointy-faced, like a human, but very pointy chin and gills coming out here, came onto my page. And I said, "Who are you?" And he said, "Sasquatch." And so I realized the value of that I can actually see them with my eyes shut, and acknowledging that, I still would like to see them with my eyes open, but that's not going to happen.
Of course, but I bet you can feel them.
Oh, yeah, but I can see them with my eyes shut.
Yeah, no, I absolutely believe you. There was a part of our property when we lived off grid that I used to call the Fairy Glen. And it was very different to the rest of the property. And there were a lot of like sandstone rocks and ferns. Like there's so many areas in the property that you would like we walk down from the house, and the land was very undulating. It was just so magical. Like you could hear the grass grow. I could see energy particles in the air, and rocks that came out of the land that we named like whale rock because it looked like a head of a whale coming out. And behind the house there was one on the escarpment that reminded me of an Inca, so I called it Inca. And then there was another one where it was huge, massive. I called it monkey face because it looked like a tropical area, and we weren't tropical, but it had all the native orchids when they were in bloom, and it just looked like a big gorilla's face. And then there was the little woodland, and because we were in a valley and very like surrounded by native forest. And then I'd go to the end where was the Fairy Glen, and I used to love walking down there. And it was such a different environment with all the ferns, and it was very magical, and just all sandstone rocks, and then up, to a cliff face. And I could feel them there, and even the water from our creek was different at that end, and the trees and I've always had a connection from a little girl. And you've just made me think about something then, because well, I've thought about it a lot and talked about it a lot over the years, but when I was a little girl, I was too scared to go up to the end of our hall because I always would see shadows in the dark. And they were more monster-like. They weren't cutesies. And I always had a fear of them. And I always used to have these dreams that there was like this half person, half ape with a trench coat on and a hat, always in my dreams. And I was very fearful of that being. And I have talked about it many times over the years to different people, and when I saw orbs, like they were so real, they were not in my imagination. So, and the feeling that arose in my body, like there's feelings that where I might be fearful of something that I might see or hear, and I'm often feeling myself being touched, especially on my head or my shoulder, and I hear whispers of my name, and I'm not mad. I literally, when it first used to happen, I would always turn around to see who was there, and then I realized that they were spirits or other beings, just communicating with me in some way. And it was always on my right side, my right ear. And even sometimes I'm just sitting around and I literally can feel my head being tickled, and I just allow it. Whereas at first it was like, what is that? I remember thinking a few times it might have been a huntsman in my hair, and there was nothing there. And I just thought they're with me all of the time. And sometimes I do talk to them. So I love that you have shared that in your story. Very, very beautiful and inspiring. Like I'm just, tell me more, tell me more. Is your art based around your experiences with this, or?
No, I did 6 years at art school when I came back to Australia. My husband died,
Oh,
and I came home. And I went to art school, and so I'm very much an impressionist and expressionist and fiber artist, really.
mm,
So texturalist. So I I don't have a particular style. I just explore so many different avenues of art. Um, I I enjoy painting with wax and fire, which is called encaustic art.
Oh.
And it's one of the oldest arts on the planet because the story of how encaustic art happened was that there was a Greek boat taking a load of urns to Egypt, and they were also carrying pigment. And one of the bags of pigment broke, and the guy that was polishing the banisters with his cloth and the wax tried to wipe the pigment off one of the urns that had leaked onto it,
Mm.
and he couldn't get it off. It just made a worse mess of wax and pigment, and so he got a candle and tried to burn the wax off. Um, and what happens when you hit wax and pigment with a flame is you get what's called a crystalline structure, and it's only there for like 30, half a second, and then it disappears. So anyway, he saw this crystalline structure, and he went and got the captain and showed him. And the captain was so impressed with that he commanded that all the urns be painted in this way before they got to Egypt.
Hmm.
They created a whole industry, and Egypt was so impressed with the encaustic art that urns that they actually started making their floors. And there's been Egyptian buildings found in Africa with encaustic floors, and encaustic is actually what's on the walls in their tombs. So it's a very ancient form of art. And the other thing that I do is what's called cold wax paintings, which has only been in Australia for about 10 years. And you make up, you melt your wax and dissolve it into the wax, and it creates what's called a creamy wax. But you can't use a brush with it. You have to use a spatula, and you can only buy the spatula in America. So
Oh.
you have to send to America for the spatula, and then it lends itself very much to landscape paintings. And my father was a professional artist, and he was a landscape artist, and I'm not a landscape artist, but with with the cold wax medium, it lends itself to really beautiful mystical landscapes, and so I've done quite a few of those as well. And I actually won the Dobell Festival one year with that, so that was
Oh,
quite.
congratulations on that. So I want to go back a bit to the Native American, but before we do that, and I hope I termed that right, Native American, because I know that, um, did I term that right?
Yeah.
Yeah, good. Yeah. Um, so with your art, first of all, I'm very curious because I'm an artist, not officially, not officially trained, but I've done art my whole life. And actually, I'm taking a diploma in it next year because I've kind of the last couple of years, I really want to do it, but I've lost, I don't know, I've just lost something. And it's more about having the right space to do it. And so I'm excited about that. But is your art on exhibition? I'm sure, do you sell it or tell us about that because I can put links in the show notes for people because I'm really curious now, especially when you use the word mystical. Anything mystical? Ah,
I actually have 300 paintings in my storage unit,
wow, beautiful.
and and I'm not painting at the moment because I can't fit any more in there.
I get
Uh,
it. I've got 20 and that's enough.
yeah, so no, actually writing. an encyclopedia on angels at the moment, and I've been writing that for 13 years.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
I've signed a contract with with Ingham Spark Publisher, and it's going to be made into 7 books, and then eventually at the end of that, it will be one big encyclopedia on angels. So the
Wow.
first one is 365 transmissions from the archangels and archaeas. And the archaea, if you haven't heard that word before, are female counterparts of the archangels. So Uriel's twin flame is Archaea Aurora. And I've been working with Archaea Aurora for the last 6 months, and she's extremely demonstrative. So she wakes me up with blue flashing lights on the ceiling and the smell of gardenias across my nose at 4 o'clock every morning. And I do transmission for her. And she just ran my retreat. So I actually run 2 retreats a year at Stroud Monastery, which where I teach people to connect with their angelic team, and they are physically touched, physically moved, and they are taught the language of the angels. So
Oh,
at the moment, it's a full-time job.
excuse me, I keep coughing. Well, I love this angel that is demonstrative and you can
Aurora.
smell gardenias. That's me. I love gardenias and being a natural perfumer. So that totally got me and being demonstrative. I love that. I love that. So, I'll definitely be in touch with you about your courses, and I can imagine that that would keep you busy and fantastic, celebrating you with your books. That's amazing. So we can put some links in the notes about that. I just want to drop back to your life with your husband, and I'm seeing you, I'm honoring you with coming back to Australia. How hard was that for you? Like,
It wasn't hard because my
okay,
daughter was having her first baby, my first grandchild, and I wanted to come home.
okay.
And my parents were getting old and needed care. My father actually died 2 weeks ago, so we've been through quite a bit with him at the, and so yeah, it was time for me to come home, and I've lived with 4 different tribes, and I married into the last one, which was the Lakota Ghost Horse tribe. So yeah, I've lived a wildly adventurous life, and it was, sometimes you just know that it's time to come home.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. I understand that. So how long were you living in those, like how long were you away living like that? I mean, it would be so magical, I would imagine. Um, it's just, I love living on the land. I love living off the land and I grieve it. And I know that I can't do it now. I can't do it on my own the way that I used to, and I miss it so
Mm.
much. So, how long were you living those?
Well, I had a job working for millionaires in Sydney, and they used to pay me cash in hand. And because I lived in their condo, 20 floors above the um, Sydney Harbour with 360 views, and because I drove their Mercedes Benz, and because I just never had to pay for one single thing, I saved every cent that I made. And so I'd work for 6 months, and then I'd have enough to just live for a long time. Um,
Amazing.
yeah, and so I'd just take off and go and live with one of the tribes in America. And so that's how I started this journey. It's like the first ones I lived with were the French Cree, and I had no intention of doing that. Um, but I was standing on Newcastle Beach, on a windy day in winter, and I was waiting to meet a guy that was coming down to, because I used to teach Tai Chi,
Mm-hmm.
coming down to get some ideas about how to set up the business of running a class. And so I was waiting for him, and he wasn't there. So I was kind of pacing up and down, and there's this guy leaning against the rail with black leathers on and an old black police bike, and a red kerchief. And he came up to me and he said, "Pardon me, honey, for being so forward, but I'd really like to take you out for lunch."
That it's like, oh yes,
Time
very.
in my life I've ever swooned.
I love it.
And anyway, yeah, so he ended up being from Canada, and I fell madly in love with him, and we had a wonderful affair, and my daughter fell in love with him as well. She was 4 years old, and so we packed ourselves up and went to Canada. And when I got there, I realized that he had unfinished business with another woman.
Mm-hmm.
I don't hang around when that sort of thing is happening.
No,
So
too much.
I found myself at a powwow, and I my daughter was still young enough to be having an afternoon sleep, and we were at the powwow a couple of days before everybody was arriving. And I was an artist at the time, so when my daughter lay down to have a sleep in the afternoon in the tent which we were staying in, um, I would just get my drawing stuff out and just draw. And anyway, some of the grandmothers saw that I was doing painting, and they asked me if I would help paint the bodies for the ceremony, because a powwow is actually a dance competition between tribes, and they have their traditional face painting markings. And so they came up to me and said, "Would you mind helping with the painting of the face?" And I've never ever in my whole life painted someone's face before. So, but I said, "Oh, I'll give it a go." So anyway, I started painting these faces, and it was really weird because it was at a time when I'd just come out of Christianity, and um, I Christianity doesn't encourage you to be psychic. I've been psychic all my life. So,
Mm-hmm.
so anyway, I looked at these guys' faces, and it was like I could see the symbols before I painted them. And
Mm-hmm.
it was almost like I was tracing these symbols that I could see on their faces. And I was blown away by that because that had never happened to me. And
Mm.
then, and all of a sudden I knew what the symbol meant. So I started saying to these guys what the symbols meant. And suddenly it went from being three lines of people having their face painted to everybody wanting me to do it, because I was giving them a reading and I had no idea that was what I was doing.
Yeah, how magical. That's powerful. So powerful and beautiful and such an honor.
Yeah. And so the powwow lasted for 4 days. And at the end of it, or not the end of it, the day before the end, there was a young Indian girl who was crying, and she was walking past my tent crying hysterically. And
Mm.
I was sitting doing my usual thing of drawing while my daughter had a sleep, and I had my back to the tree, and my legs were just straight out, and I'm not good at crossing my legs, so I never have been. Anyway,
Mm.
I just put my arms out, and she came in and put her head on my chest, and I just started stroking her hair and comforting her. And after about a few minutes, my hand was no longer on her hair. It was about an inch away, and I found myself stroking down and then flicking off as if I was taking the
Mm.
pain out of her body. And she was there for about half an hour. And at the end of that, she stood up and she said, "Thank you for the healing." And I said, "Is that what I was doing?" That was the beginning of me experiencing psychic healing. So I
Yeah,
went on to be a healer after that. So
beautiful. It
yeah,
just came naturally, as
yeah,
it does. It's there, and when we're ready, it
yeah,
opens up.
yeah.
Ah, so many stories you have. I think we'll have to get you back. I want to keep talking, but I'm aware of the time as well. Thank you, Crow. I really, really appreciate it. And I'll share your contact details if that's what you want, of course, for
Yes, of
people
course.
yeah, that may
But
want to do
what I'd like
workshop.
to say to your people is that I have been writing with angelic transmissions for quite a while, and I'm currently selling them each transmission for $1. So every day people buy for $1, they buy my reading. So they might put $10 in my account. So for the next 10 days, I would send them an angelic transmission. And some people can only get them on Mondays because that's their lives are so busy, but other people get them every day. So that's an opportunity for you if you want to be guided by your internal journey and the angels.
I love that, love that, love that. I'm going to do it.
Really?
I'm going to do it because I'm just
Okay.
loving your energy and I'm so grateful. You know, I'm grateful for my podcast because I put it out there um, and saying, you know, I want people to, you know, come onto my podcast. And I just love having these real conversations. It inspires me. And I feel very grateful that people feel safe enough to come on. And it's so powerful because I'm meeting some of the most incredible, beautiful, soulful people like yourself. And it excites me, and I feel so uplifted when I'm in these conversations with people. So thank you. And yes, I want to, this podcast will be out in a little while, but I'll talk to you about that to get your details and put them in the show notes and get people getting transmissions. I am like, I want it now. So I'll be in contact. Um, Other than that, any last words of wisdom that you can share with anybody or our audience? Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So the outer journey is a total illusion. There really is only one journey, and that's your inner journey. And we think that we have to learn. I'd like to say, stop learning because it's all inside you. Everything that you need to know is inside you. And it doesn't matter what a teacher tells you unless you are willing to receive that and hear that and participate with your inner journey in what's being offered. All they're doing is reminding you of what you already know.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. I love, love, love that, which has brought me to a question. So I have to say this, and I would love your thoughts on it because I'm a person that my life has been full of challenges, and through them I've grown so much, and I love the woman that I've become, and I not that I would wish some of those challenges or any of them on anybody, but I'm partly grateful, as painful as some of them were, because I am who I am today. I think I am. I don't know. I'm not sure that I would have been the same woman. And what I say is like, I never want to stop learning. So perhaps maybe I need to reframe that because I know that we have it all within us. We are such wise people. We've just not been taught to believe that or know that or how to tap into it. And I know as I grow through age that more and more wakes up, but that's because I get excited and I want it and and I get better as an individual. So my question is, am I saying the wrong thing by I want to keep learning, or should I'm thinking that the words are now not correct. I need to change those words to perhaps, I don't know.
As I want to know what I know.
I love that. I want to know what I know. Oh, bless. That is fantastic. I love it. Thank you for sharing that. And
You're
that's for
welcome.
everybody. I want to know what I know. I'm going to do that for a mantra. Thank you. I really, really appreciate that. So on that note, I think that's a really good ending actually, and I'm so grateful it came up because you really touched something there within me thinking, oh, maybe I'm doing this wrong.
There is
Because I
no right.
know, yeah, I know. And it's just that I say that because I know that I've learnt so much through whatever it is I go through and I grow and I love it. So, but I want to know what I know.
Hmm.
Perfect. So, anything else? Did you want to say anything else or you feel complete?
I just wanted to say that every cell in your body has vast intelligence.
Mm,
And and if you could have a hemorrhage, I used to have hemorrhages instead of going to the doctor. And a hemorrhage is just they prick your finger and they get one drop of blood and they put it onto a microscope and then it goes onto the computer. And in that one drop of blood, there are millions and millions of cells.
mm,
And your blood is alive for 20 minutes after it leaves your body. So you can see the white cells running around cleaning up the debris. You can see the parasites eating your white cells. You can see whether you're hydrated. You can see if you've got cancer. Um, and so inside that one cell is is vast intelligence, but there could be a lot of things inside that cell we don't know about. So that
mm,
cell might be a universe to a whole lot of other stuff. And that cell might think that the liver is its universe. It might not know about the rest of the body. It might just know about the liver, you know. So
mm.
and then the liver itself has its own energy and its own intelligence. And so we are living in the illusion that we are not this incredible universe ourselves that holds vast intelligence in every aspect. So when you really get that, you can stop looking outside yourself for what's inside.
I absolutely agree because I look within. I know that it's all within. And I love that you said that because I'll often say to people, we are not separate from the universe, nor is it from us.
Mm.
We are the universe,
Yes.
and so, and I just come to these things just come out. And so I love it because then I have conversations with people like you and, it's like, yeah, I get it. I totally get it. I love it. Um, so thank you for that wisdom, those wise words. I really appreciate that. And I look forward to connecting, Crow, and having more conversations. And I'm going to sign up for some transitions. I
Very
love
good.
it. All right, my dear, I'm just going to say goodbye.
Thank you. Blessings.
Oh, you too. And yes, I would love to know what everybody thinks of this conversation. And if you have any questions, and remember to love us, like us, follow us, share us, subscribe, whatever it is. And yeah, I'll be back. So once again, bye.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you for joining us on the enchanting journey through the realms of magic, mystique, and self-discovery. I hope you enjoyed our time together on the Rich Witch podcast, where we delve into the depths of witchcraft, astrology, and the unapologetic rise of women. Please subscribe, rate, and leave a review. And as we wrap up, I encourage you to carry the wisdom and magic we've shared into your own life. Embrace the power within you and revel in the beauty of your own unique journey. Stay tuned for more magic, and in the meantime, stay curious and know your magic is a gift to the world. Blessed be, beautiful ones, and remember, the magic is always within you. This is Julie Nelson, signing off.